I got a call from Tenant A one night that said his neighbor, Tenant B, broke into his house and stole his hair clippers, like that you cut your hair with or whatnot. But the best part is apparently that his neighbor didn't only just steal his hair clippers, but replaced them with a older model hair clippers.
Oh my.
And I said, how do you know this? He goes, well, I called Walmart where I bought my hair clippers from, and this model that I have in my bathroom, they haven't sold for like 7 years, and I bought mine 5 years ago. I'm like, well, how did he get into your house? Well, I don't know. Like, because the doors are fine, the windows are fine, everything was locked. And like, well, how the heck did you get in your house? And he goes, well, he climbed through the vents, which I think we all know. A vent in a duplex, really, one, they're really generally not connected, and two, I don't think a human can get through them. But he was bound and determined to convince me that his neighbor climbed into his house, replaced his hair clippers with an older model so he'd get the newer model, and left no evidence of actually breaking into the property. So true story on my grave. One of the most bizarre things I've ever encountered.
It is a common saying amongst real estate investors that you make money when you buy, not when you sell. While this catchy phrase has value, it fails to convey how easy it is to lose money through poor property management. Whether you self-manage or hire a professional, it is important to understand how to navigate the common pitfalls and challenges with rental properties without losing your shirt or your mind. That's why you have tuned in to Maximizing Your Property Value, the apartment owner's guide to operating rental properties as a successful business. I'm your host, John Stiles, real estate agent and team leader of the VIP Real Estate Group at Bridge Realty. As a current multifamily investor and former property manager myself, I understand the headaches and difficulties of keeping an investment property from becoming a money pit and time sucker. It takes a solid business plan, it takes tested systems, and it takes key team members to actually find success. So let's take a deep dive and maximize your property value. Welcome back to another episode of Maximizing Your Property Value. I'm your host, John Stiles, and I am very pleased to introduce to you Kevin Ortner from Renters Warehouse, the CEO and president. And Kevin, I really appreciate you coming in today and being a part of my show here.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited about it.
Wonderful. And Kevin, I think a lot of people know the name Renters Warehouse. You guys have really grown a lot over the past several years. You've kind of become a household name. But for any of our audience out there who maybe doesn't know the history or kind of what you guys are doing now, could you fill us in a little bit about Renters Warehouse as a company and you as in your role there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Renters Warehouse is a full-service real estate investment firm. So we started out here in Minneapolis, where we are, as a local property manager about 12 years ago, maybe 12 and a half years ago now, and have since grown to have 42 offices across the country. We manage about 23,000 homes for about 18,000 different investors. So our primary focus is really retail investors, mom and pop investors who have 1, 2, maybe 5 homes. We also are doing some work with some of the institutional Wall Street money that's out there buying single family homes, which we've all heard a lot about. So we have some clients that have several thousand homes across the country, and take care of every, full service property management needs, from leasing homes and collecting rent and coordinating maintenance and repairs and accounting, all the things that go into that day-to-day piece of property management. We also recently launched some technology to help real estate investors analyze new markets, or maybe analyze their next real estate investment as well, to really try and make it easier, right? It can be so difficult to have to go through the spreadsheets and find the right property, et cetera. So we launched our investor marketplace, which takes a lot of data, compiles it, puts it all together, and makes it really easy to search for your next rental property as well. So that's new for us this year. I've been doing this with Renters Warehouse for over 10 years now. I started out as one of our franchisees down in Phoenix, Arizona. Found myself back here in Minneapolis and have been growing our corporate offices ever since. So I've been doing it a long time. It's been a fun road, and just really, investment real estate, single family homes, it's definitely my passion, helping people find that financial freedom, that independence that can come from investing in properties over the long term. So really excited to talk to you about it today.
Okay, wonderful. And so you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I just want to kind of identify what your company's focus is. You mentioned single family homes. Is that primarily the type of properties that you manage?
Yeah, mainly single family, which includes, true single family homes, condos, townhomes, and we'll do some small multifamily as well. Duplexes, fourplexes, really anything that doesn't need on-site management. We oftentimes won't do many more than maybe a 12-unit building. We have done larger, but we primarily focus on single family, and I'd say probably 97% of our portfolio is a true single family home.
Okay, wonderful. So, one of the purposes of this show is to help out our small property owners and give them ideas how to, like the show title states, maximize their property value.
Sure.
Part of that is interacting with a property manager like yourself.
Yep.
So, how do you kind of divide up the responsibilities within your company to make sure that you're serving the client's best needs, best interests, and kind of keeping a good overall picture of what's going on in the property?
Yeah, I think transparency is key for that, right? A lot of property investors can be frustrated with the relationship they have with a property manager that's maybe not using advanced technology or trying to bring new technology to the forefront and doing property management on spreadsheets and things like that, which still happens out there. And so we've really spent a lot of time building and developing our own proprietary systems that allow a lot of transparency with our property owners, allow them to give input where they want to, and also just kind of sit back and watch things happen when they want to as well. And as far as internally, what we found works best is we're really a departmentalized property management company versus a portfolio management. And what I mean by that is rather than going and hiring a really smart guy like John and saying, John, here's your 120 homes to manage and you do everything. You got to lease them, coordinate maintenance, collect the rent, handle any evictions that might come up, all that kind of stuff. We have departments throughout the organization that handle different tasks of property management. So we have a group of rent collectors that all they do all day long is collect rent, make sure the money's coming in on time, track it down. And the amazing thing is when you start to specialize like that, you can really find and hire people who love doing that task. There's not tons of people in the world that love to collect rent all day, but when you find them, it's awesome. They're passionate about it. And the best thing is they don't forget. You don't run into a situation where a maintenance request or a lease signing happens or something else happens and you don't get to the rent collection part, right? And the same thing with maintenance. We have a whole group of maintenance coordinators that take the maintenance requests, look at them and understand if it's a tenant responsibility or a landlord or homeowner responsibility. They understand what the pricing should be in certain markets for these types of things, negotiate with our vendors to get the best pricing, et cetera. So we really broke it up to make sure we have, subject matter experts that work on all aspects of property management. And then we've got the technology to make sure that all the lines don't get crossed when people are working on it. So that's kind of how we do it internally. Everyone does a little bit differently, but we found that's the way we can continue to scale our business and also deliver great results, whether it's, data and KPI results and property performance, or just a good customer experience for our clients as well.
Yeah. So, and I really understand how separating the roles like that can be beneficial for specialization and growth and handling all those different properties. I myself used to be a property manager, and I was kind of in a different model where I had a portfolio that I was responsible for.
Right.
And I think the big benefit for that model is I knew what everything was going on.
Yep.
But the downside was I got really overwhelmed.
Right.
And it was hard to keep up with everything.
Yeah. There's definitely pros and cons to both. I think portfolio management, you can probably have deeper relationships with the tenants that are in the property because you're the only person that's doing work or interacting with them. And maybe even deeper relationships with the property investor at the same time. We try and do to overcome that, again, is really leverage on and lean on technology and a great system internally where anyone who's working on a property or taking on a task on a property at any given time can see the history of what's been happening, follow up with a tenant on maybe a rent collection issue while they're having a conversation with them about maintenance. So it tries to keep it cohesive, but we do have to lean on technology to do that. And sometimes you sacrifice some of the maybe more personal interaction you can get from having one person do all of those tasks. But I think we're a little biased because it's how we do it. But we believe that the pros outweigh the cons, and it allows for a pretty good experience overall, and most importantly, good property performance.
Yeah. And so do you have one of those roles? Is that like your point person for interaction with the property owner?
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you have one home with us, you might end up talking to several different people, over the course of a year, depending on what's happening with your property. As you grow and become a larger portfolio owner, you have 4, 5, 6 homes, we'll actually designate you a point of contact so that you don't have to worry about who do I have to go talk to about this question, or I've got 2 different questions on 3 different properties, and we try and simplify that as things move up.
Okay, wonderful. So what I want to do now is I have a segment of our show that's called Tenants Make Me Laugh.
Okay.
And so I was wondering if you could tell us a story from your experience or your company's experience, something that you just can't make up, that, something a tenant did, or maybe it could be something with your contractor or something that, you just can't make this stuff up.
Yes, I do. In fact, I was just talking about this in my office yesterday, oddly enough, and it's something that happened probably almost 10 years ago, but it was one of those things that makes you laugh and you certainly can't make up, and it was profound enough that I remember the names of the individuals that were involved in it. But it was actually, and it's just like, this is the stuff that happens in property management that unless you've actually been in property management or you're a real estate investor and you've seen this stuff, people don't believe it, right? The crazy stuff we deal with. So I had a property in Phoenix, Arizona. It was out in Apache Junction. It was a duplex. And so obviously one tenant on one side, another tenant on the other side by side duplex. And they just did not get along at all. And so we would field calls from these people all the time when they're having an argument. So-and-so kind of looked at me funny when I came home from work today. Can you give him a call and talk to him about that? That's not really in our job description nor our purview, so you guys need to work out your things yourself. Those typical neighbor complaints. But the point of that, so these guys were always going at it. And we were getting calls about it. And this is when we were much smaller. I probably managed 20, 30 homes in Phoenix at the time. And so I was, on the ground doing everything. And so I was taking those calls from on my cell phone all the time. And the story that's just unbelievable is I got a call from Tenant A one night that said his neighbor, Tenant B, broke into his house and stole his hair clippers. Like that you cut your hair with or whatnot. But the best part is apparently that his neighbor didn't only just steal his hair clippers, but replaced them with a older model hair clippers.
Oh my.
And I said, how do you know this? He goes, well, I called Walmart where I bought my hair clippers from, and this model that I have in my bathroom, they haven't sold for like 7 years, and I bought mine 5 years ago. I'm like, well, how did he get into your house? Well, I don't know. Because the doors are fine, the windows are fine, everything was locked. And well, how the heck did you get in your house? And he goes, well, he climbed through the vents, which I think we all know. A vent in a duplex, really, one, they're really generally not connected, and 2, I don't think a human can get through them. But he was bound and determined to convince me that his neighbor climbed into his house, replaced his hair clippers with an older model so he'd get the newer model, and left no evidence of actually breaking into the property. So true story on my grave. One of the most bizarre things I've ever encountered. It was very, very interesting. So,
wow, that one made me laugh. Very good.
This is why you hire property managers to deal with these things for
Yeah.
you when you're investing in real estate. So you don't have to take those calls.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good transition into my next segment, which is about customer service and relationship management. Despite these kind of crazy things that can happen,
Yeah.
and the different difficulties, maybe with rent collection or different things, how do you see customer service as a part of being a property manager?
It's almost entirely what it is, right? Whether you're talking about what's the challenge of being a property manager is we really have 2 customers. We have a client who we have a fiduciary responsibility to, which is the property owner and the homeowner, but we also have a customer in the tenant. And oftentimes those 2 parties want very different things. If there's a maintenance request, something breaks, obviously the investor and us as their property manager, we want to find the most efficient, cost-effective, quality repair we can. And sometimes it might take a day or 2 to get someone to come out there. Whereas the tenant wants it fixed in an hour, and they want it replaced with the latest and greatest model, or they want to upgrade the house at the same time it's being happened. So the truth or the right answer oftentimes lays somewhere in between, and maybe not everybody's entirely happy with the outcome, but we've done the best we can for both parties to keep our property investor and our client out of trouble with the laws and keeping their property in good shape while keeping the tenant in and paying, et cetera. So property management is really just communication and dealing with conflict a lot, even if it's not people arguing and yelling. There's inherent conflict in maintenance from both sides. It's it's someone's home they're living in and something's not working and they want it fixed. And so customer service is very, very important. And I think far too few property managers actually look at the tenant as one of their customers, because really they get paid from the property owner. That's who our contract's with, and that's how we make our money. But as we're talking about maximizing your property's value or maximizing your property's performance, the tenant is really key to your return on investment. Keeping your tenant happy, keeping them paying, keeping them in the property. Turnover is what kills you in this business. Having downtime, vacancy, rehab, repairs, all that kind of stuff. And so having a good, positive relationship with your resident, even if it sometimes means maybe spending a little bit more than you wanted to spend on a repair or giving them a credit for something when something happens. You don't want to be overly generous with those things, or just kind of whittles down your returns as well. But I think that's just super important. And so our job is to really advise our clients through that process and hopefully create a great experience for our residents that are living in our properties while doing all we can to maximize the return on investment. And that really just happens through good communication, educating both parties as to how things go and what the process looks like and why we're doing certain things. And so, yeah, I think customer service, while it's important in any business, in this one, I look at customer service as just really great communication and expectation setting. And that's probably our number one job.
Yeah, and I really like that you've said that the tenant is your customer as well.
Right.
Because, and especially it's important for the property owner, investor to understand that too, because without the tenant, there's no rental income. And without rental income, there's no value.
There's no business.
There's no business.
Right. Right.
So it's really important. I think a lot of property owners kind of forget it or don't realize it. They just think they should be paying because you're giving them a property.
Right.
I mean,
well, it can be generally when you're dealing with your tenant or your resident that's living in the property. Again, it's a problem. You don't often talk to your tenant just because, and you're going to say hello and ask how their day was. That rarely happens. And so when you are dealing with tenants, it's because some kind of problem's there, whether there is a maintenance request, they're calling to give notice to move out, they are going to be late on their rent, or they didn't pay their rent on time, or you're chasing it down, or whatever it is, there's some sort of issue. And that's what property management is, and you have to work through it. And that's why so many people like to outsource those things. They don't have to deal with problems all day long. But I think that's where the inherent, to your point, conflict of maybe investors oftentimes forgetting that the tenant's a very important part of this equation, and keeping them happy in the property while living inside the bounds of the lease agreement is important and challenging. And I think because oftentimes it's just frustrating, right? You get the call at the worst time ever. You just got home from work, you're sitting down for dinner, and now you got to deal with this issue. And so, it's inherently challenging, but certainly a key piece of the business.
Yep. Very good. So can you give us any example of how you've had to, balance the terms of the lease, maybe when they're broken, the rent's not being paid, and, providing that quality customer service, as opposed to like getting angry at the tenants or, maybe doing something rash. How do you balance that customer service with enforcing the terms?
I think it all comes to expectations up front with both our client and the tenant, and setting those expectations pretty clearly, and it makes those conversations a lot easier. So when we move tenants into a property, I suggest everyone do this. It's more than just a lease signing and move-in inspection and here's the keys and I'm on my way. It's taking the time to really sit down, read through the important aspects of the lease, such as, okay, here's your rent amount, here's when it's due, here's the grace period if there is any, here's the late fees, and you know what, I hate to do it, but when you pay your rent late, we're going to enforce this because, we're running a business over here, and so just know up front, if your rent's late, this is the conversation we're going to have, and here's what happens. Here's how you make a maintenance request. Here's how you can call me. Here's what to expect when that happens. It's not going to be fixed likely the same afternoon. Unless it's an emergency, it takes a day or two to get a vendor to your property. So anyway, setting those expectations, what's the tenant's responsibilities inside of the lease, like changing light bulbs or smoke detector batteries or furnace filters or whatever it might be. And what are my responsibilities as a property manager or a landlord to you? And just have that conversation. It takes 10 minutes. And that way, when it does come up and they're annoyed about something because you're enforcing that late fee or you're calling them and asking where their rent is, like, hey, remember that conversation we had back? You agreed to this. I'm not trying to be a bad guy, but we've got a business to run, and I've got to be able to make my payments just like you have to make your payments. And so how do we rectify this? How do we bring it together? And so I think it's expectation settings up front, and then just knowing that you can't take it personal, right? You never know what's happening. It's like any conversation, right? Or any interaction you have with humans every day. You never know what else is going on in that person's life. And so if they're calling you frustrated because they can't pay their rent, and you're like, why are they mad at me? It's not my fault, right? There's probably a lot of other stuff going on. And so having those conversations and trying to be compassionate and empathetic towards what's going on, and saying, hey, I'm trying to run a business, and so I need that rent to come in. But okay, you can't pay it today. It's late. Like, what can you do? And if you haven't had an issue with the tenant in the past, that's often the best route to go and say, okay, like, let's work it out. Okay, you can pay half now and half in a week. If you miss it, I'm never going to give you another chance again, because, I'll take your word now that you're going to make that payment. But if you don't, we're probably not going to have arrangements like this moving forward. And if they fulfill their obligation, great, everyone's happy. If they don't, then you got to take the conversation to the next step. But you've done, I think, at that point, what you can to give that customer service and be empathetic with what's happening in that person's life. And again, oftentimes, if you do that and a tenant gets back on track, they're on track for a long time, and maybe a year from now the same thing happens, but you probably have a little bit more hope that that they'll come through on what they're saying. A quick example about that, frankly, at Renters Warehouse, we're pretty, I don't know if militaristic is the right word, but we're very rigid in the fact that we're managing these properties for other people, and it's not our money to be playing with and giving away and extending deadlines. So we'll have conversations with the property owner if we are going to have to make a payment plan with a tenant or extend something, and it's pretty much like a you pay or you're out situation in most cases, because that's our business, is ensuring that we're taking care of our property owners. But like being a plumber and how your house always leaks if you're a plumber because you're not fixing it, I have some personal properties that I used to be pretty hands-on managing, not as much anymore. And I had a tenant that he was going through a divorce. His wife was leaving him. He was trying to find a roommate. He wanted to stay in the house, couldn't come up with enough rent to pay, and kind of said, hey, if you, can I pay half this month? And I don't know when I'm going to be able to pay the other half, but I'll try and add it to the rent check and build it up over time, et cetera. And against my better judgment, I said, okay, that's fine. It ended up working out great. He made his half month's rent payment. He paid on time the next month. I think he sent like $50 extra. Next month, he didn't really pay anything. Next month, he paid an extra $100 kind of thing. And long and the short of the story is 5 or 6 months later, I got a check from him for the remaining $400 he owed me, and a note that said, hey, thanks so much for helping me out. My wife and I are back together. She's moved back in, and like all is great with life, and could have done without you. And so that was one of those situations where sometimes it does help to try and be flexible. But again, we don't have that much flexibility with our clients. But for people who are managing their homes themselves, if you are in a situation where you can be maybe a little more generous than I would even recommend you be, like that story, sometimes it works out really, really well. And so I think it's like human nature. You got to find the balance.
Yep. You've touched on a lot of great things there. Number one, setting expectations. Number two, realizing that your tenants are people too. They have different scenarios that are going on in their lives, and you don't know what's going on in their life, Right. So, and number three, not taking things personally, because I think as property managers, speaking as an ex-property manager,
recovering property manager.
Yeah. It can just kind of build up, and it can all, eventually it can feel like, the world's out to get you, but you just have to build some thick skin there.
Right. Absolutely.
So, well, listen, I've got actually a question from my audience, and
exciting.
I wanted to let you take a look at that.
Okay.
Hey, this is John from Lakeville, and my question for your guest is, what do I do when there's an unauthorized occupant? Do I add them to the lease? Do I kick everyone out? What should I do? Thanks.
All right. So John's question was about unauthorized occupants. So generally speaking, and in some states it's actually law, every person over the age of 18 has to be on the lease. We actually notate children that will be living in the property as well, in a different section of our lease. And so we have a pretty good grasp on who should be there. But every once in a while, you will do an inspection of a property or find out one way or another that there's additional folks living in the house. And I think the best route to go is to try and add them to the lease because it doesn't interrupt your rental income. You don't go through the expense of an eviction. Sometimes evicting for that reason can be challenging. Again, depending on what state you might live in or even what county you're in, your property's in, depending on the rules. So looking at adding them to the lease is the most important, but it's more than obviously just writing the name of the lease and saying, having them sign it so now they're bound to the property and the terms. It's going through the full process, saying, all right, you know what? First, you got to look at occupancy laws. And again, your local municipality might be different, the county might be different, the state might be different. Can you have this many people living in the property? If you can, if you can't, that's easy. Either that person has to move out or everybody has to move out, and you need to get proof of that. If you are able to add them to the lease because you fit into the occupancy requirements, then go through the full background check. Say, you know what, fine, you can be here. I just need to know about it. You need to be financially responsible. You need to be bound by the agreement of the lease. So I need you to fill out an application, go through the background check process. And you're probably not necessarily looking as much at credit in that situation because you've already approved other people live there that are paying, and hopefully that continues. But really at this point, it's a criminal thing. Make sure that they don't have any criminal background that might not fit inside of your box for allowing tenants. Then you also want to be in compliance with local, state, and federal rules around background checks. Well, some cities across the country, like Seattle, are really making it almost impossible to use background checks to deny people for any reason. There are still federal requirements around terrorist watch list, verifications and money laundering things, all these kind of things where you have to run folks through this. And you as a landlord or property owner, if you're not doing that right, can be liable. So it's important to get the background check, get comfortable with what that says, and then go through and add on to the lease. So that would be the preferred route. If for some reason, you won't be fitting inside the occupancy restrictions of your city, or for some other reason you don't want them in the property, or they don't pass your background screening, then you need to either formally in writing ask that person leave and they can't be there. Then you're probably gonna have some follow-up inspections. If you get a feeling they're still there, you have proof they're still there, or you feel like they're not cooperating, then you may have to go through the full eviction process. But I would start first, to directly answer the question, with trying to add them to the lease.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And I think one thing I wanted to get to in all of this show is to have people think through their systems and make sure that they're not always surprised, because these types of things come up. Right. And, to kind of have a plan of action when something like this does come up so you can know what to do.
Right. I think that's important. And there's a lot of surprises that can come up because we're dealing with humans, and we're dealing with where people live, and a lot of emotions and things like that can come out of it. But really going in, again, I think with the expectation as a real estate investor that things will pop up. It's not the end of the world. There's always ways to fix it. You just got to work through it.
Yep. And so now I just want to speak to our audience quickly. If anybody else would be willing to submit a question to my future guests, I would appreciate it. I'd like to just make this show kind of interactive and make it something where we can all learn and benefit. So there's going to be some comments in the show notes about how you can submit a question for our future guests. So. Hey, I want to interrupt the show quick to tell you about an exciting opportunity to take your real estate investing career to the next level. I'm talking about the North Star Real Estate Conference that's coming up September 20th and 21st of 2019 in the Twin Cities. At this conference, we'll have both local and national speakers covering topics such as syndicating apartment deals, crowdfunding, getting started in commercial real estate, business mindset, and so much more. Aside from the amazing speakers, what makes this conference great is that the proceeds from the event are dedicated to charity. Now, for a limited time, if you enter my last name as a promo code at checkout, you can get $100 off your ticket for the weekend. Again, type in STILES for $100 off your ticket. Just follow the link in the show notes, and I hope to see you there. Now, let's get back to the show. Okay, so next I want to talk about maximizing income. So for any investment property, it's often valued on the net operating income. Now, not so much on single-family houses. Those are still traded, based on comparable sales. But to an extent, the value of an investment property is based on its income minus its expenses.
Right.
So first of all, what is kind of maybe an area that some property owners are missing where they could be maximizing their income, but they're missing out on it?
I think the easiest place to start is just ensuring that you're maximizing rents. I think a lot of time for people when they're really trying to maximize property value, they're getting ready to sell in a couple of years, so they want to make the numbers look as good as they can, as they really start diving into where can I cut. And you can spend a ton of time and a ton of effort trying to cut 1 or 2% from your expenses, when if you would have raised your rent 5%, it all drops to the bottom, right? And so really ensuring that rent is appropriately set, especially if you've owned the asset for a long time, especially if it's a multifamily property where we really are talking about valuing it on NOI or the net operating income. And you might have gotten a little bit lax with renewal rent increases, or getting a little bit lax on really looking at what the market's doing when you're leasing out your home. We've seen more often than not, we'll see people that we're taking over their properties. We look at their rents like, hey, you could be getting $100 more a unit on this, right? It's like, I've had those tenants in there for a long time. They've been great. So start with rents. Do a really good, thorough rental analysis. Understand how your units compare to others in the area, what the rent should be, and start working those up at the renewal process, or if someone moves out, of course, at the release process. So that's where I'd start first. And then I think, the biggest next controllable expense is maintenance. And it may be that you need to invest some money in the form of CapEx, which doesn't necessarily hit the expense side of your balance sheet, but it's some cash out of your pocket to make some repairs, upgrade some of the systems in the building or the property, so that you have fewer kind of ongoing expenses for those things, whether it be the heating and cooling systems or the water heaters or whatever it might be. Those things do need to be upgraded over time. I think far too often as real estate investors, we're kind of hoarding that cash, and so many of us will say, hey, let's try and see if we can get that to limp along with another repair. But now you're doing several repairs on that furnace every year, and it's just hitting your expense category, where instead of, you could say, hey, I'm going to put $4,000 in or $5,000 in to upgrade this furnace or whatever it might be. Putting in some CapEx, taking care of that preventative maintenance, I think is a quick way to reduce the ongoing annual expense you're going to see.
Okay. Yeah, and that was kind of getting into my next topic. Expenses can sometimes feel like they're just getting out of control. Mm-hmm. And, this thing's breaking, that thing's breaking, and what happened to last month's income?
Right.
How do you as a company kind of help out your property owners to keep things under control and while still maintaining, the good quality of that property, so it's not losing value in its condition?
Yeah, I think, two comments on that. And I think one of them is that at first it comes to mindset. And when you're speaking with new real estate investors or people who maybe have 1 or 2 homes or a duplex, sometimes they're not thinking about it as an investment fully, or a business fully. So they say, man, I had to contribute $300 to my property account this month because the rent got eaten up with some repairs, or, maybe they're in a situation where they're actually, I used to deal with a lot of clients who were upside down on their home, and we'd be able to rent it out for $1,200, but their all-in monthly cost was $1,300. They're saying, God, this is obnoxious. I'm putting $100 into this thing every month until I can get the rent to come up over the next couple of years. And thinking of it as an expense is the wrong way to look at it in my mind, because it's an investment. And the question generally back to them is, well, how much money you put in your 401k? How much money are you putting into your investment accounts every month? Oh, well, like $1,000. Well, this is an investment, right? And over time, you're going to get that money back, but you can't let it frustrate you and say, hey, I'm going to get out of the game because it's costing me some money. And so obviously if you're buying it as a true investment, you're not going to buy something where your rent's not covering your expenses every month. But it's a good example of how that mindset works, where oftentimes you might have a month where you had to replace some big components in the home or systems, and you do have to put money in it. You've got to look at it as less of an expense and more of like, hey, I'm investing in my investment. I'm putting more money aside that's going to be compounding over time to be worth more. So I think the mindset's important. But then it comes down to just really ensuring that you're on top of things, meaning when there is maintenance that has to be done in the home, that it's being done in a quality way, so you're not going to have to fix it again 6 months later, that we're getting the best pricing we can from our vendors. And I think that's one of the benefits of using a larger property manager, is we can oftentimes buy down the maintenance costs by talking with our handymen, our plumbers, our general contractors, painters, whatever they might be. Say, hey, we're going to give you millions of dollars a year of business, but in return, we need a 20% discount. But you don't have to market for us. We're going to pay you on time, all these benefits to a small business owner. And they say, hey, that's fantastic. Steady income coming in. I'll give you a 20% discount all day long. And that discount gets passed along to our clients. So being able to almost group buy things helps keep those expenses low. And then I think also really understanding and doing good inspections. So a good move-in inspection on the property and a good move-out inspection, so you can compare the two and understand that some of the repairs or rehab costs you might have to do on a turn can easily be deducted from a security deposit if it was tenant damage, but you have to be able to prove it really, really well, or you're not going to win those cases if it goes to court. So just being diligent on that move in, that move out, and understanding if it's mid-lease and something comes up, it may be the tenant's responsibility, and you have to have one of those difficult conversations with them saying, hey, your kid was hanging on the mailbox and the mailbox tipped over, like, you got to fix it, right? That's not my responsibility. And those little things all start to add up and can really reduce that monthly expense.
Yep. I think that's huge. Ideally, the property's income should pay for all of its expenses,
right.
But that's not always the case, especially if you have, high capital improvements in a specific month.
Right.
So just changing your mindset, like you've talked about, to think about the property as an investment, not as, just something that's going to pay you all the time.
Right. Ideally, your property is going to cover all the expenses, but there are going to be those months or those years where it doesn't work out that way, especially if you've had the property for a long time, because you have to invest in keeping it up. But again, that's money you're going to get back when you go to sell the property because it's been improved. And so again, it's not necessarily an expense. It's not cash you're never going to see again. It's cash out of your pocket. That's never fun, but it's something you're going to hopefully get back over time.
Yep. Okay. Want to shift a little bit here to when an investor is looking at either buying or selling one of their properties. What is your role as a property manager in that process? Do you get involved at all to give kind of opinions and guidance, or what do you?
I think it really depends on the client and what their needs are from us, because some may work with really great real estate investment brokers that really understand how to do it. They can look at the numbers, get the information from us, and put together the plan to market the property and sell it. And so there we just really act as an employee of the investor, like we are anyway, and can get the information put together that they might need, whether that's lease documents, expense reports, accounting statements, et cetera, and really deliver that to the agent. Then there's times where people ask us to, about where they could price their property, or if now is a good time to sell, or whatever it is. And one of the things we try and be at Renters Warehouse is very consultative with our clients. And so be able to work them through it and say, hey, now would be a good time, or now's not a good time, or if you are going to sell it, what are you going to do with the money? So let's go try and see if we can't connect you with the right people, or through our contacts and our agents find you your next property. So you can 1031 exchange that, so you're not paying the tax. So we'll work as much as a consultant as we need to with folks. But some people have the team already developed. So we just, we kind of work as an assistant, so to speak, and we can coordinate showings and arrange things like that. So I think it varies by every situation, depending on what our clients need.
Okay. Well, speaking about good times to sell or not.
Yeah.
Can you give us I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball, and tell us what's happening in the market, what's happening with rents, vacancy, tenant concessions, what's it going to be like in the next 6, 12, 24 months?
I think currently, as we sit here in, what are we coming, almost September of 2019, it's a great time to be a real estate investor. I think it has been for a long time, and frankly, I think it's going to be for a very long time. But what I mean by that specifically right now is vacancy in most markets across the United States is pretty low. We're seeing pretty aggressive price increases in a lot of markets. On average across the country, when the economy's good, it seems like rents go up about 3% a year. Some markets less, some markets more. But we're seeing probably closer to an average of 4.5 to 5. In major metro areas as far as rent increases are concerned, and that's just a supply and demand thing, where the vacancy is low. There's not a lot of inventory for nice rentals in the market, and so we're seeing a nice increase in rents coming through. So that's fantastic. I think that's going to continue to persist for a while, and frankly, especially if there ends up being a recession anytime in the next 18 to 24 months, because it's going to prohibit people that maybe want to buy a home from being able to buy. They're going to have to rent. And it's going to, I think, fuel the demand for rentals. So I think there's going to be, between now and 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, demand for rental housing, whether it's a single-family home, condo, apartment building, I think it's very strong, especially in the single family market. That's what I know best based on what we do. You know, it's always hard to predict what's going to actually happen with the real estate market itself. They've been talking about it, going down for many years. I think there's a lot of false reporting in the media about really what's going on. There's a lot of positive economic trends happening out there. But also we're at we're in kind of unknown, uncharted territory with us now being in the longest economic expansion in the history of the country. Who knows when that's going to turn around? But I'm a long-term real estate investor. So would I buy a property today? Absolutely. I'm looking at buying some property now because I'm not worried about a recession, economic downturn, or real estate downturn in 2 years because I'm going to own it for 10, 15, 20 years anyway. It doesn't really matter, right? So I think if for real estate investors looking, I get the question a lot, should I really be buying now or should I wait till the next downturn? I don't think it matters. Maybe if you can time the downturn right, you can get a little bit of a better deal. But if you're really investing in real estate the way you should be, which is for the long term, doesn't matter if you buy it now for 200 grand or you wait a year and a half and it happens to be 185, right? It just doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. So I'm a buyer. I'm almost always a buyer though, because I'm a 20-year hold guy. Yeah.
That's some great perspective there. Well, listen, Kevin, we're going to be wrapping things up here. I wanted to shift gears to talk a little bit more about yourself, and we appreciate all the insight that you've shared kind of about the real estate market and property management best practices. As we wrap up, I just want to give the audience a chance to get to know you a little bit more.
Sure.
So can you tell me why you get up in the morning?
That's a good question. My alarm clock is usually what gets me up in the morning. But look, I'm really passionate about what I do, right? Aside from building a business, and I'm passionate about growing a really good, big business that employs a lot of people and helps families in that regard and things like that. And that's exciting. But I love real estate. I love teaching people how to invest in real estate, how to create financial freedom and wealth independence through real estate. I wrote a book on it called The Rent Estate Revolution. It gives tips on how to get started in this and really why you should. And I think ultimately the American dream has changed a little bit with the fact that, pensions went away in the late 80s. You really can't get a pension unless you work for the government now. So it's on all of us, individuals, to be planning for what we're going to do in retirement. That's not always fun and exciting, but I think real estate is such an amazing, powerful tool to be able to do that, because you can have a fairly small amount of money and buy an investment property due to the fact that you can leverage the bank's money to buy it. It's one of the few assets, or really the only one I know of, that ordinary Americans can go to their bank and actually borrow money to buy an investment. Imagine going to your banker and trying to borrow $100 grand to buy Apple stock, right? They're going to laugh you out of the bank. Same $100,000, same banker to buy a residential real estate property, they're going to give it to you. And so you can get in for pretty little money down. And like all investments, if you start early, the compounding effects of all of the magical levers that real estate has is just huge. And so I love sharing that with people. I love helping people achieve that dream, build their portfolio, and hopefully make some sort of small dent in what I think is a retirement crisis that's happening in our country, because people are woefully unprepared for this, especially up and coming generations. And so that's what excites me. And if I wasn't doing it in the capacity I am today, which is as a property manager and growing a property management firm and a real estate investment services company, I'd be doing it a different way, whether that was just educating people on it, speaking on it, whatever it might be. And so that's what really excites me. And I think kind of drives me to get up every morning.
Wonderful. Another question I have for you is, looking back in your life, what was maybe a pivotal moment or person or event that kind of changed you or made you who you are today?
I can think of a couple that come to mind. And one, I used to be a corporate pilot, so I flew corporate jets for a living before I did this full time. I was investing in real estate at the time, and that's kind of how I got into the business. And in the real estate, in the recession in 2009, I got laid off from that job. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to put myself in a position ever again to let someone have that much control over my family's well-being and my financial future and my life, et cetera. And that was really what made me jump into being an entrepreneur full-time. And that has been something that's stuck with me for a long time and motivated me to say, hey, I'm going to go be 100% in charge of what happens to me versus just working for someone else. And that's what worked for me. So that was definitely powerful. And then I also, from a professional development, personal development, trying to get better every day scenario, I stumbled onto one of my mentors, whose name is Darren Hardy. He's a kind of renowned success mentor, I think he calls himself, but public speaking figure, written some books, a lot of great, different professional development courses, things like that. Found him, eventually worked through a lot of his course long enough to actually meet him and know him now on a personal level. And he's just been kind of a like-minded person who's had a lot of success, much more success than me and much earlier than me, to help guide me and motivate me and continue to have me develop over time. And so whether it was in a life event, like getting laid off and saying, hey, I'm going to go take this on my own and make sure I'm in charge of my future, or, really finding people, mentors, and folks to follow that inspire me, has been, really important as well.
Great. All right, 2 more questions. What is your favorite way to kind of give back to the world?
Man, I like to do things that are local. And so that's generally my family getting together and going to our church and volunteering and giving back to the different community events and programs they have there, or finding the local or regional, nonprofits and charities to give back to that do it. The reason I like to do things local is I think you understand where the impact happens more. You can kind of see it happen. There's smaller organizations that generally have less fluff, so to speak, and so more of your time and treasures are going back to the cause, and you can really kind of watch that happen. I also believe in, you need to take care of your neighbor before you can really take care of anybody else. So I like to do things local, whatever that might be. Very passionate about military veterans, and then just other local charities and events.
Wonderful. Okay, last question is, how can our audience get in touch with you?
Yep. Let's see. LinkedIn is a great way. Very active and live on LinkedIn. So search me, Kevin Ortner, on LinkedIn. You'll find me and my profile there. Shoot me a message, connect with me, follow me. We're putting out lots of good, what I think is good content, good educational material around real estate investing, how to get started, tips and tricks, that kind of stuff. So that's the best way to find me. And then you can find Renters Warehouse at renterswarehouse.com. Learn all about our company services there, what we have to offer, and watch us there as well.
Great. Well, Kevin, like I said before, I really appreciate you coming in today and sharing all this great knowledge and insight to our listeners and viewers. And so I appreciate you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on, John. Appreciate it.
Wonderful. Talk to you later. The opinions shared on this show are for informational purposes only and should not be taken as a solicitation for representation or investment in any specific offering. Please consult with your financial, legal, tax, and real estate advisor before making any investment decisions. John Stiles is a licensed Minnesota real estate agent with Bridge Realty. Thanks for tuning in to Maximizing Your Property Value, the apartment owner's guide to operating rental properties as a successful business. If you're considering scaling up, downsizing, or right-sizing your real estate investment portfolio, it's important to know how to determine your property's value in today's market. That's why I've put together a free ebook for you called How to Calculate Your Investment Property's Value. To get your copy, go to www.realestatestyles.com/value. Now, if you found any value in today's show, be sure to subscribe to our email newsletter, YouTube channel, and podcast through your favorite podcast player. All the links are in the show notes. And would you do me a big favor? Help me get the word out about this show by sharing with your friends on Facebook and LinkedIn. And lastly, we appreciate your 5-star rating on iTunes. I really appreciate you and wish you the best in your real estate investing career. Signing off, I'm John Stiles with Bridge Realty. Make it a great day.